Hello, everybody. I'm Eshan Pokhrel,
My name's Cameron Cummings.
and today we are here with a 35th episode of the PB Political Podcast. Today we're talking about how Russia last week announced that they're going to be suspending their involvement in the New START Treaty, which was the only nuclear arms pact that they share with the United States, as well as the introduction of China into the Russian-Ukraine conflict and what that means both for Russia and Ukraine and also for the world in general. So we'll just go ahead and get into it. Tuesday, February 21st, a week from when we're recording, Russian President Vladimir Putin announced that Moscow would suspend its participation in the New START Treaty, which again is the only nuclear arms pact they share with the United States. Mr. Putin accused the Americans and NATO of declaring Russia's defeat in the war with Ukraine as their goal in the involvement, and this led to the decision. Despite that, Mr. Putin was careful to emphasize Russia won't be leaving the treaty, and the Russian Foreign Ministry stated that they would respect the caps on nuclear weapons that the treaty set. So I'm not sure what they're really meaning by withdrawing or suspending their involvement. Maybe they won't look to renew it in about 2 years or 3 years when it comes back to due. Russia will also continue to respect the ballistic missile chain information exchange with the U.S. And the Foreign Ministry said that the decision could be reversed if the U.S. de-escalates tensions in Ukraine and in the war in general. So they kind of came out with this announcement early Tuesday morning for us in the U.S. It panicked a lot of people around the country because we didn't really know what it meant, but it seems relatively tame on the scale of what it could have been because they'll still be honoring the agreement overall, and I'm assuming the likelihood is that they will look towards not renewing it when the time comes more than anything. So a little bit of a history before I'll let Cameron dive into his research here about future possibilities of conflict. The New START Treaty took effect in February of 2011, and it gave the U.S. and Russia 7 years to meet the central limits on nuclear missiles, and that limit has to be upheld for the remainder of the treaty. And the treaty numbers are 700 deployed ICBM missiles or submarine launch missiles and heavy bombers, 1,550 nuclear warheads on ICBMs, SLBMs, and deployed heavy bombers, and 800 deployed and non-deployed ICBM launchers, SLBM launchers, and heavy bombers. And the treaty was extended until February of 2026 and must be revisited at that time. And I'm assuming that's the main thing Russia's looking at when they say suspending the treaty. So Cameron, you can just take it from here.
Yeah, so New START has been the treaty that they've had. But also in 2019, the United States withdrew from the Immediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, or the INF, with Russia, citing Russian violations of the treaty. The INF treaty had banned the development and deployment of land-based missiles with a range between 500 and 5,500 kilometers. In January 2020, Russia's new hypersonic missile, known as the Avangard, became operational. The Avangard is designed to travel at speeds of up to Mach 27 and is capable of carrying a nuclear warhead. In October of 2021, Russia conducted a test launch of their new Sarmat ICBM, which is capable of carrying up to 10 nuclear warheads and has a range of over 11,000 kilometers. So that's just also the history of New START, as well as what Russia has done with their nuclear warhead capabilities and their missile capabilities. But also, I'm just going to jump into this for a little bit, and then I'll let Ishan take over. We throw China into the mix, which every time we throw China's name around, things are going to go south.
Yep, that's for sure.
Makes it a little bit more, interesting, for better or for worse. So China called...
No, I was just going to say that China found its way into this conversation after being pretty hands-off over the last year or so, because it's been over a year now of the Russia-Ukraine war, so they just finally made their move known, I guess.
Yeah. So China called for a ceasefire and peace talks between Russia and Ukraine on the one-year anniversary of the war last week, and a move that surprised many people, most Americans included. And a 12-point position paper's fourth point stated that dialogue and negotiation are the only viable situation. Which also still, like I just said, threw a lot of people off. China, like Eshan said, was very hands off, kind of like do what you want esque, leave us out of it, and that's exactly what they did.
And I think
China stepped in on their 1 year anniversary, which threw a lot of people off, but it could be for the best. That's only time will tell.
I think a lot of people, I think a lot of people expected, at least a lot of people on the American side of the conflict, expected China to side with Russia, and that would kind of create like a world, like a, like a powers vacuum type thing where there's sides are being chosen. But I think China actually made a smart move by trying to stay neutral and calling for dialogue and negotiation, which has not been seen much around the world stage. Well, that's not true. Around the American side of the conflict.
Okay, so the viewpoint that China said of dialogue and negotiation the only viable situation had been echoed by many in recent months as the war increasingly seemed or a stalemate. Israel's former prime minister, I'm going to butcher this name, Naftali Bennett.
Naftali Bennett.
Naftali? Hey, I don't, kind of close.
Close enough, honestly. No disrespect.
Made waves when he claimed the United States and the United Kingdom blocked a potential peace deal that was in the works last year. After much backlash from the West, Mr. Bennett has walked back his comments. China sent its top diplomat to Moscow to meet with President Putin and suggested negotiations would be the only way for the crisis to end. Yeah. And then the final point that we had was the Chinese leader Xi Jinping and Mr. Putin are personal friends, and the talk of a visit between the pair in the coming months could help Mr. Putin approach Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to begin the process of peace talks. So, Eshan, just throw me out what you're feeling about all this.
So, I saw the news about Naftali Bennett, it's been a month or so. He did an interview where he claimed, and of course, Israel has a messy prime minister situation. Netanyahu's back in power, but Naftali Bennett was there for about a year or so, I believe. I could be wrong, but he was there for a brief moment of time, and he, in an interview, said that there was talks of a peace deal coming in the near future, and the United States and United Kingdom, who are kind of the more hawkish elements of the Western side of the war, I'd say, did not agree with it, and it fell through. So, obviously, that brings questions to both countries, because why would you want to prolong a war? Of course, if you're in the defense industry in either country, there's your answer. But from an absolute, a humanitarian perspective, no one wants war. So it is interesting that Prime Minister Bennett actually came out and said something to that effect in public, where everybody, and he's not even Prime Minister anymore, so anybody can criticize. He doesn't have as much power as he did at this present time. And like you said, China sent its top diplomat to Moscow, because China's, I guess, really the only... the U.S. has a sort of a channel open of communication with Russia, and you don't want to close it completely, obviously, because then bad things happen. But China has been making its moves, try to get closer to the negotiating table. And Xi Jinping and Mr. Putin are friends, like you said, and if any visit comes from the two of them, I think that could really go a long way to see if Russia would be willing to give up, or not give up, but willing to go to the negotiation table. And then it comes down to NATO and the U.S., the Western side of the war, agreeing to do the same. Specifically, the Western military complex that exists in these countries, our countries. So I think there'll be much to see there. What do you think about China kind of setting itself up as like a negotiator? I think this is a point I have in the next section. We can just talk about it now, because they've had such a negative media presence over the last decades with one, obviously.
I think it's also just something to boost their image, so people don't think, they're quote unquote all that bad. You know what I mean? They're like, hey, we're stepping in to try to bring the Ukraine-Russia war to an end. We're trying to be, the peacekeepers, the middleman.
Yeah.
So it could be like some people say, like a PR play to make themselves look better. But honestly, who's to tell?
What do you think? I guess it's because, obviously, PR-wise, they've had the heavy backlash over the Uyghur concentration camps in Xinjiang in one of their western provinces. The Olympics were supposed to be sort of a way to sandpaper that, or sand over that gap, and it didn't really happen because of COVID, which also brought a lot of criticism to China, because COVID, obviously, especially with the new DoD report that, I think it was DoD, that calls the lab leak hypothesis the most likely outcome of the origin of COVID. So that'll certainly bring another wave of international fury to China because, the whole world economy was absolutely shattered due to COVID, and a lot of countries and a lot of people haven't been able to recover from that. Do you think that this is another interesting point I was thinking about just now? If China successfully mediates like an end to the war in Russia and Ukraine, if they can negotiate something there, what do you think that gives? Like, what do you think happens to Taiwan? Because everyone thinks China's wanting to take the island back, and how do you think that? What do you think will happen if they end up going through an invasion of Taiwan after mediating a successful Russia-Ukraine cease, like a stalemate?
I feel like it make them look worse because we want to stop a war just to turn around and start a war. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And obviously, if you invade Taiwan, the U.S. said they were going to do something about it. I think he started an even bigger conflict by doing that. But I'm not trying to downplay the effects of the Russia-Ukraine war because obviously here in America we have dumped billions of dollars into that. But invading Taiwan after allegedly is not the word, potentially having a successful peace treaty between Russia and Ukraine would make them look worse in every account.
Yeah.
But what are you thinking about it?
I think
especially how obviously it's going to be set on a bigger stage this time if they invade Taiwan because now they just threw themselves into the center of it and now the spotlight's on them.
Yeah. Well, obviously the hypocrisy, like you're saying, would be apparent. I mean, you can't. I feel like, like you're saying, like if you negotiate the end of one war and then start your own, especially with like the history China and Taiwan have, this Russia and Ukraine have the same history, just it's like literally it's like double jeopardy. You're restarting the exact same situation on different side of the planet. But I think another interesting thing, if that does happen, will be where will Russia side? Because Russia will likely, if they go to a ceasefire or whatever, and China ends up invading Ukraine, and China was a big player in the ceasefire, or China ends up invading Taiwan, will Russia support them because they were forced to stop their own activities? What will Russia think? I find that actually kind of interesting. Where will Russia side? I think that it end up being neutral because they have to recover from war. But I think that they'll be more hostile to China than China hopes they would be. They'll be less of a friend because they were forced to stop their own military exercises or invasion of another country while China gets to do their own. I think that's an interesting thing to think about in the future. Hopefully it doesn't come to that, obviously. But, China has been trying to set itself up as a negotiator, and I think they're trying to do what the West has not done to this point, which is be a middleman and be like a negotiator. France tried to do this with Prime Minister or President Macron. I think he's President. Emmanuel Macron tried to kind of be a negotiator, but he just didn't have the political power really to do it. And also, I don't think the Americans wanted to listen to him, and obviously we're the big players. We're such big players in this war. Let's get into the spending. The U.S. has spent $46.6 billion in simply military aid since the beginning of the invasion.
Also, before you jump into that, just harping back to your last point about us not being middlemen, we more were like suppliers than middlemen. And I think it would have been far more better for us, like I said, PR-wise and financially, not saying we shouldn't have funded them at all, but saying after so much, we said, okay, this has been going on for a while. We're seeing it's going to lead to a stalemate. Like, no one's really budging. Let's talk peace.
Yeah. And I think that comes down to, like, honestly, the defense industry. And I don't want to talk bad about the defense industry. Well, I don't want to talk too bad about it because, like, our city, Huntsville, is the epicenter of the defense industry. And it's done a lot of good for the city. But also, the humanitarian aspect of it must not be ignored. I think that, like I was saying, $46.6 billion has been sent by the U.S. in military aid to Ukraine. The next highest receptor of U.S. aid since 2020-ish has been Israel, and they've only received $3.3 billion. So it's not like we're sending more money to Ukraine that's already being sent out. We're just sending more money in general over to overseas, and this is going mainly to Ukraine. The U.S. has spent over $40 billion in aid, like more than $40 billion in aid, more than any other country, or over $40 billion in aid. So the U.S. sent over like $70 billion in aid. That's $40 billion more than the next country, and they're all in European countries. So the Europeans aren't even bothered to send aid. The war is being propped up by the United States on the Ukrainian side. If the U.S. withdrew all aid, Ukraine would lose tomorrow, and I think that's a point that most people agree with, just because of the sheer amount of weapons, money, training, everything we're sending over. I find it kind of insane, and I think Republicans politically seized on this really well. When we did the episode about the East Palestine derailment a couple weeks ago, President Biden was at the same time, like a couple days later after that podcast, he was in Ukraine and in Poland, making speeches, stopping, and Republicans capitalized on this smartly because he neglected the domestic issue, which has blown up really. I mean, the new Palestine issue or the East Palestine issue has really gotten a lot of attention recently. And I think it was just a really bad look for him politically to go overseas while that was happening. And while no one from his administration was really there until a couple of days later. So I think politically, this has put Democrats in a really bad spot. I don't know how he's transitioned to that, but yeah.
And like you said, if we pull out everything tomorrow, and woke up and said we're not gonna, fund this war anymore. Like you said, Ukraine's folding tomorrow like a table. And the fact that European countries aren't bothering to send aid, they're like right next door, or aid, I take that back. Not saying they're not, but aid nowhere near the same amount we are. I'm not trying to change the subject of the podcast. We have our own domestic issues that we need to be worried about that are far more important than this. Says a lot. Like I said, we're from Huntsville, so I'm not going to talk anything about the defense industry. But it does show.
Yeah.
Actions instead of words.
Yeah, I think it was a smart move by Republicans to really capture the big spending on Ukraine while something as big. Of course, this the East Palestine. I keep saying New Palestine. The East Palestine disaster is a bipartisan effort. It's not just Democrats who ignored environmental safety. It's like both administrations, Obama and Trump, like we talked about a couple of weeks ago, who ignored rail safety regulations and got lobbied against, all that stuff. But definitely not a good look politically currently for President Biden. Mark Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, has said that he believes the war will end at the negotiating table, and this was a couple weeks ago with an interview from the Financial Times, and neither country will likely be able to secure an outright victory in battle. And Mark Milley, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the chairman, he believes that it'll go to a stalemate and have to be negotiated on. And honestly, I just don't see why. If you're American, if you're in the American military sphere, if you see, or political even, if you see China is making moves to be a diplomat, you need to also be a diplomat. Because China, if they think that's going to go to diplomat, or it's going to go to negotiation, and they're behind negotiating, I think if the Americans get behind negotiating too, then firstly you can get all of Europe in line, because most of them already want to negotiate and end this war.
Yes.
But then also you can show world cooperation for a brief moment before you get back to the inevitable, and rightly so, issues we have with China and with other countries.
I mean, you pretty much said it as clear as you could. I mean, if we got involved, or at least another major country got involved with peace, trying to, push for that, what choice are they going to have?
Yeah, I mean,
especially if let's just take this for Ukraine. Your main backer says, we're done backing you. It's time to talk peace. They have no choice but to do that.
Yeah, and not even that, even if you want to think about it cynically, the boost you'll get politically right now from ending billions of dollars going to Ukraine and ending the war would be huge. I mean, if you're not pouncing on that as a Democrat right now, as President Biden,
especially as Joe Biden, election time's around the corner,
and who's running again.
I ended the war and saved us from spending even more money.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the holdup is, especially again if China's on it. This could be a rare moment of maybe they'll get a UN approval thing from it too. It'd be I don't see what the delay is at this point. I don't know. The New START, we didn't even talk, New START kind of went out the window when we started talking about it, but that treaty being suspended, again, Russia said that they're willing to rejoin. They didn't leave it, so they're willing to like reverse the suspension. So I don't think that was really too big of a deal, but it is a little scary that that's what we got to at that point. And that's what made China jump in. I mean, it was the 1 year anniversary a couple days later of the war, but China definitely saw that, and that must have informed their opinion on what to do with the war. I think that's everything. I think, right? I think it's about everything.
Yeah, I mean, I have no more points.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we said everything we needed to. We're going to start having podcasts come out every Monday.
Every Monday, it'll come out every Monday, or it'll come out early Tuesday. I don't know, because we're next week. Hey, I guess we can announce it. Next Monday or Tuesday, podcast number 36 with Mayor of Tuscaloosa, Walt Maddox. That'll be fun. We'll talk to Mayor Maddox about City of Tuscaloosa and everything in between.
And education.
Yeah, definitely education. I think we're recording Monday night, so I might release it on Tuesday. But regardless, Monday or Tuesday episodes will be out. Today's Tuesday, so it'll be out Tuesday. But we've been doing some Wednesday podcasts. It feels weird, so we're gonna try to get these out early in the week. We appreciate you for listening. Keep telling your friends. The podcast is growing. These consistent episodes have been helping. It's been growing. We appreciate that. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, all that, Twitter. Anything you have to add, Cameron?
Follow me on Instagram as well.
Yeah, I don't know if you could hear him.
And Eshan. Mainly me, though.
Yeah, follow Cameron on Instagram. We'll put I think his thing's in the description. I don't know, but we'll figure it out. This is about everything I had to say. So thank you for listening. I'm Eshan Pokhrel.
My name is Cummings.
And goodbye.